The air in the secret chamber was thick with the scent of drying silk and faint traces of jasmine from the small bundle Madame Hoa had placed beside the loom. I sat there, my fingers deftly moving across the threads, weaving patterns that held more than mere decoration. They carried our whispered plans, our silent defiance. Jin's presence beside me was a steadying force, his lean frame shadowed against the flickering lantern light. The subtle scar tracing his jawline caught the glow, a reminder of battles fought both within and without. "You weave more than silk," Jin said quietly, his sharp eyes meeting mine. "You weave hope." His voice was low, almost a murmur, yet it carried an earnestness that stirred something deep within me. I glanced away, the faintest blush warming my cheeks beneath the coolness of the dim room. In the confines of our rebellion, moments like these were rare small islands of warmth in a sea of danger. "It's not just the patterns," I confessed, "but what they say when no one is watching. When words can cost lives." Jin nodded, his gaze drifting to the lantern's dancing shadows. "The silk is a language only we can read, a shield against the Emperor's watchful eyes. But sometimes I wonder if it can protect us from what's inside the doubts, the fears." I reached out, my fingers brushing his hand, a silent promise in the touch. The rebellion was more than a cause. It was a crucible where trust was forged and tested. And in Jin, I found a companion who bore his scars openly, whose courage was tempered by a haunted past yet unyielding loyalty. Outside, the muffled sounds of the city at night reminded us of the ever-present peril. Imperial patrols moved like ghosts through the narrow alleyways, their footsteps echoing faintly but with a menace that tightened my chest. Each stolen second together was a defiant act, a fragile bond woven in the shadows. Our conversations grew bolder, our silences more meaningful. Beneath the moon's pale gaze, Jin shared tales of his time as a soldier, the horrors he'd witnessed. And the moment he chose to turn his sword against the very regime he once served. His voice trembled at times, revealing vulnerabilities he rarely showed to others. "I fight not just for vengeance," he said, "but for a future where no child fears the tax collector's knock." His words resonated with the ache in my own heart, the memory of my father's death at the hands of those cruel enforcers fueling my resolve. Yet, amidst the turmoil, the ember of something more tender kindled between us, a forbidden affection that both comforted and complicated. One evening, Madame Hua called me to her side, her serene gaze holding a knowing softness as she observed the subtle exchange between Jin and me. "The threads you weave carry many meanings," she said gently. "Let your heart not be a thread pulled too tight, lest it break. But neither should it be so loose that it unravels your purpose." Her counsel lingered as we prepared for the next covert operation, the silk patterns becoming not only codes but symbols of our intertwined fates. The rebellion was no longer just a collective struggle, it had become deeply personal. Yet, with every stolen glance and whispered promise, the danger grew. Betrayal lurked like a shadow ready to sever the fragile ties we had forged. I knew that our bond, as precious as it was, could also be a vulnerability. Still, in the quiet moments between the looming threats, Jin and I allowed ourselves to dream, to imagine a day when our love would no longer need to hide in the folds of silk and shadows. Those dreams gave me strength, a fierce determination to weave not only coded messages but a future where hope could flourish openly. As the night deepened, I returned to my loom, the rhythmic clatter of the shuttle a steady heartbeat beneath my thoughts. Each thread I wove was a testament to the courage blossoming within me, a courage that was no longer mine alone, but shared with Jin and all who dared to resist. The rebellion stakes were rising, and so was the risk. But in the midst of uncertainty, our forbidden bond was a light, a quiet defiance that whispered of freedom, of love, and of the unbreakable threads that bind us even in the darkest times. And so, beneath the veil of secrecy and danger, we wove our future together, one delicate yet unyielding thread at a time. The night air was thick with tension as we gathered beneath the shroud of a new moon. the stars hidden behind heavy clouds that whispered of rain. The mountain pass, narrow and treacherous, lay silent except for the distant clatter of hooves a tax caravan, laden with the spoils of our labor, winding its way towards the imperial treasury. My heart hammered in my chest as Jin and I crept closer, the scent of damp earth and pine needle-sharp in my nostrils. Every step we took was deliberate, measured, as if the very shadows might betray us. Jin's eyes, sharp and unyielding, flickered with a mixture of determination and caution. "Stay close," he murmured, voice low but steady. "We only get one chance at this." I nodded, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear alone but from the weight of what this moment meant. The silk banners we carried, embroidered with the secret patterns Madame Ha had taught me, were more than fabric. They were our words, our warnings, our hope woven into threads. Tonight they would be more. As the caravan came into view, torches flickering against the thick darkness, I felt the pulse of rebellion quicken in my veins. The guards were alert, their armor catching the torchlight, faces unreadable beneath their helmets. Jin signaled, and I unfurled the silk banners, their delicate patterns rustling softly in the cold breeze. Each stitch was a message, a call to those who knew how to read between the threads. Suddenly, a sharp crack shattered the stillness. A concealed firecracker exploded near the lead horse, horses rearing and men shouting. Chaos erupted like a storm unleashed. In the confusion, Jin and I moved swiftly, cutting the ropes binding the heavy cargo and scattering the precious silks and gold into the mud. The rebellion symbol now fluttered openly, a silent yet defiant roar against the Emperor's iron grip. The thrill of success surged through me, but it was tempered by the knowledge of what would come next. Governor Zhou would not let this insult go unanswered. His reach was long, his wrath cold and calculated. Already, I could imagine the sharp glint in his eyes as the news reached him, the dark corridors of his mind turning with plans of retribution. Back in the dim sanctuary of our hideout, Madame Hua's steady hands wove new patterns into silk, each thread a safeguard, a secret. Jin and I shared a quiet moment, the weight of our choices settling between us like dust. "This is only the beginning," I whispered, the fire of rebellion kindling within my soul. "They will come for us harder now." Jin's gaze met mine, fierce and unwavering. "Then we must be ready. For every thread we unravel, we weave a new hope." As dawn threatened the horizon, the silk banners still fluttered in the wind, fragile yet unbreakable, just like the spirit we had ignited. The road ahead was perilous, fraught with shadows and sacrifice, but in that moment, I knew we had sparked a flame no darkness could extinguish. The rebellion had truly begun. The air in the hidden chamber was thick with unease. Around the low wooden table, faces once familiar now appeared shadowed by suspicion. I sat between Jin and Madame Hoa, the flickering candlelight casting long, trembling shadows that seemed to mock the fragile trust we clung to. The news was devastating. A spy had been uncovered within our ranks. The very walls that had shielded our whispered plans now felt like a cage closing in. It began with a folded note, passed hurriedly by Lai Wei in the crowded marketplace. His eyes, usually bright and quick with humor, were clouded with fear as he pressed the message into my hands. The words within spoke of betrayal, of secret meetings with imperial informants, and of plans leaked to Governor Zhao's men. My heart pounded as I read the silk threads of hope I had carefully woven now tangled in dread. Jin's jaw clenched beside me. His scarred face was a map of battles fought and survived, but even his usual fierce confidence faltered. "We must act quickly," he said, voice low but urgent. "If the spy remains, our entire cause is at risk." Madame Ho nodded, her calm presence a beacon amid the storm. "Trust is our most precious thread," she said softly. "But it is also our most delicate. We must learn to weave caution into our bonds." That evening, I sat by the window of my small room, the cool night air brushing against my skin as I stared into the shadows of the alleyways below. Each face of my comrades the laughter shared, the silent nods of encouragement now flickered with uncertainty. Could any of them be the traitor? The thought was a poison that seeped deep into my bones. Days passed in a relentless cycle of whispered interrogations and guarded meetings. We scrutinized every word, every gesture, and every silk pattern for hidden clues. Madame Hoa taught me to embed warnings in the weave, tiny shifts in pattern and color that only those initiated could read. The silk became a language of survival, a shield against the unseen enemy within. But suspicion bred paranoia. Old alliances fractured as accusations flew like arrows in the dark. Jin and I found ourselves walking a razor's edge between vigilance and doubt, our shared bond tested by the weight of fear. One night, as we huddled in the shadows, Jin confessed, "I fear we may lose more than just trust. We risk losing ourselves." I understood all too well. The rebellion was more than a fight against imperial oppression. It was a struggle to preserve the soul of our community. Each thread of silk, each whispered secret, was a testament to our resilience. Yet now, that tapestry seemed at risk of unraveling. In the market, Li Wei continued his dangerous work, slipping between stalls and shadows to gather intelligence. His courage was a fragile flame against the gathering night. I often met him in the quiet corners, our exchanges brief but weighted with meaning. "They grow bolder," he warned one evening, eyes darting nervously. "Governor Zhao tightens his grip, and the spy feeds him our every move." The weight of his words settled heavily on me. We had to act, but how? The spy was one of us, someone who knew our secrets and could undo us with a whisper. Madame Hoa's lessons became my guide. I wove new patterns into my work, each thread a silent message, warnings to friends, challenges to foes. The loom sang beneath my fingers, a song of defiance and caution intertwined. Yet the more I wove, the more the shadows seemed to close in. Trust became a currency too costly to spend freely. I found myself watching faces, listening to tones, searching for a flicker of deceit. My heart ached with the burden. One night, Jin and I confronted a comrade whose actions had grown suspicious. The conversation was taut, words sharp but measured. In that moment, I realized the true cost of rebellion was not just in battle or bloodshed, but in the fractures that betrayal wrought upon our souls. The night air was thick with an oppressive silence as I moved cautiously through the narrow alleyways of our city, the familiar stones beneath my feet seeming suddenly foreign and treacherous. My heart pounded with a mixture of resolve and dread. I had just returned from a secret meeting. Clutching carefully folded silk embroidered with coded messages that could change the tide of our rebellion. Suddenly, a sharp movement caught my eye from the shadows. Before I could react, strong hands grabbed my arms, dragging me backward. The clang of iron shackles echoed sharply, cold metal biting into my wrists. My breath hitched in shock as the weight of betrayal settled over me. Someone I trusted had led the imperial enforcers to me. "Mai Ling," a voice hissed in the darkness. "You thought you could hide forever." It was Captain Huang, his eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. Around him, other enforcers closed in, faces obscured by the night, but their intent unmistakable. I struggled briefly, but strength was no match for numbers and iron. They pulled me through the twisting maze of alleyways, the city's usual comforting sense of spice and fabric replaced by the acrid smell of smoke and fear. My mind raced. The rebellion was in peril, and worse still, I was the prize they had long sought to capture. Thrown into a cold, damp cell, I sank to the hard stone floor, the chill seeping into my bones. The faint moonlight filtered through narrow bars, casting slender shadows that danced over the rough walls. I touched the silk garments I wore, each thread a story, every pattern a whispered secret. My fingers traced the fine embroidery, weaving invisible messages meant for my comrades, a silent language of hope and resistance. Despite the suffocating fear that threatened to overwhelm me, I breathed deeply, recalling Madame Hao's teachings. The art of weaving was not merely crafting fabric. It was a weapon, a shield, a beacon. Even here, in the depths of captivity, I could reach out. The heavy door creaked open, and Governor Zhou appeared, his presence as imposing as the cold stone around me. His ornate robe seemed almost out of place in this grim setting, but his calculating eyes held me captive more potently than any chains. "My Ling," he said softly, stepping closer, "you and your rebellion have caused much unrest. Yet, I see the fire in you. A fire that could serve the empire rather than burn it down." I met his gaze steadily, refusing to show the tremor running through me. "I serve only my people," I replied quietly. "Your empire serves only itself at our expense." His expression flickered a brief shadow of doubt or perhaps regret, but it vanished quickly, replaced by the cold mask of an enforcer sworn to duty. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, Jin lingered in the shadows, his lean frame tense with anguish and fury. The betrayal had cut deep. Someone we had trusted had compromised our sanctuary and endangered us all. Yet beneath his anger lay a fierce determination. He would not let them take me without a fight. "We will get her back," he vowed silently, fists clenched tightly. No matter the cost. Inside my cell, I allowed myself a moment to close my eyes, summoning the courage that had brought me from the quiet loom of my childhood to the dangerous front lines of rebellion. The silk threads that bound my fate were fragile, yes, but they were also strong, woven by countless hands united by hope, sacrifice, and defiance. As I prepared to face whatever trials awaited, I knew that my capture was not the end but a new beginning. The rebellion's spirit could not be shackled. The night stretched on thick with uncertainty, yet beneath it all, a spark glowed, a promise that even in the darkest shadows, dawn would come. And when it did, the threads of our resistance would unravel the chains that bound us all. The heavy wooden door creaked open with a groan that echoed through the cold, stone chamber, where I was held captive. The faint glow of a single oil lamp cast long shadows that flickered against the damp walls, painting the room in shades of gray and orange. I sat on the hard bench, my hands resting quietly in my lap, the faint stains of silk dyes a reminder of the life I had been torn from. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear and defiance as the footsteps approached, deliberate, measured steps that belonged to the man whose name was whispered with dread throughout the city, Governor Zhao. He entered with the imposing presence that had become infamous in whispered tales among the oppressed. His ornate robes, embroidered with intricate dragon patterns in gold thread, shimmered faintly in the lamplight. His cold, calculating eyes scanned the room, sharp and unyielding, yet beneath their icy surface, I sensed an undercurrent of something more complex. He paused before me, his gaze locking onto mine, commanding the space as if it were his very domain. "You are my Ling," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying the weight of imperial authority. "The weaver who dares to defy the emperor's law." I met his stare without flinching, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. His presence was a shadow that stretched across the room, suffocating and absolute. "Tell me," he continued, stepping closer, "who are your accomplices? What secrets do you hide in your silk?" The question hung in the stale air, testing the limits of my resolve. I thought of Madame Hao's lessons, the hidden patterns woven into the fabric of rebellion. My fingers itched to create, to encode messages that could slip past these walls. But here, in this cold confinement, words were my only weapon. Governor Zhao's eyes narrowed, studying my silence as if it were a puzzle he was determined to solve. Yet, behind the steely facade, I caught a flicker, a brief hesitation that betrayed the man beneath the uniform. Moments like these were rare, glimpses of humanity obscured by duty and ambition. He turned away abruptly, walking to the tall window that overlooked the sprawling city below. The setting sun bathed the rooftops in hues of crimson and violet, a stark contrast to the gloom of the chamber. For a moment, his expression softened, a fleeting shadow of doubt that seemed to weigh heavily on his shoulders. The silence was broken by the sharp footsteps of Captain Huang, Governor Zhao's relentless enforcer. He entered briskly, delivering a report on the latest rebel activities with clipped efficiency. His eyes flickered to me, unblinking and stern, a reminder of the ever-present threat that loomed. Governor Zhao dismissed the report with a curt nod, then faced me once more. "You must understand," he said quietly, "the empire demands order. The taxes, the laws, they are the threads that hold this land together. Without them, chaos will unravel everything." I wanted to argue, to tell him that the silk we wove was not just fabric, but a lifeline, a symbol of hope and resistance. But my voice was caught in the tension that filled the room. He stepped closer again, the candlelight casting shadows that danced like restless spirits on the walls. Yet, he admitted in a rare moment of candor, "I sometimes wonder if there is another way, if the price we pay is too great." His confession hung between us, fragile and dangerous. It was a crack in the armor of imperial authority, a sliver of humanity that complicated the clear lines of enemy and ally. I met his gaze, the same silent defiance that had carried me through countless nights of fear and hope. "The silk we weave," I whispered, "is stronger than chains." Governor Zai's eyes darkened, a mixture of anger and reluctant respect. "Then you will have to prove it," he said, his voice steely once more. As the door closed behind him, the room seemed colder, the shadows deeper. Yet within me, the flame of rebellion burned brighter, fueled by the knowledge that even in the heart of oppression, there were cracks, shadows, where hope could take root. This encounter was more than interrogation. It was a turning point. Governor Zhao's internal struggle mirrored my own, caught between fear and courage, duty and desire for change. The path ahead was perilous, but the silk threads of resistance were woven tightly around us all, binding us in a struggle that would echo through the alleys and beyond. I settled back against the cold stone, the echo of his footsteps fading but the weight of his words lingering. The Emperor's shadow loomed large, but so did the possibilities hidden within the darkness. Every thread I had woven, every secret message stitched into silk, was a testament to a truth that could not be silenced. Even the smallest thread could unravel the strongest chains. And so, in the heart of captivity, beneath the watchful eyes of imperial power, my story, our story, continued to unfold. The rebellion was no longer just whispers in the shadows. It was a force growing, defiant and unyielding, ready to challenge the empire's grip and weave a new future. But the night was far from over, and the dawn of change still uncertain. As I sat in silence, I knew the true test was yet to come. The silk was waiting to be spun anew. The cold stone walls of my prison cell pressed in around me, the scant light filtering through a narrow barred window, casting long shadows that danced like specters on the floor. My hands, once free to weave the vibrant silks of my craft, now moved with quiet purpose, threading delicate strands of silk into a small cloth, a tapestry of hidden meaning. The loom was gone, replaced by the faintest scraps of fabric and threads smuggled in by unseen allies, but the language of silk was still mine to command. Madame Hoa's teachings echoed in my mind. Every knot, every color, every subtle shift in pattern could carry a message, a code invisible to those untrained in its secrets. The imperial guards thought me broken, a mere prisoner awaiting judgment, but beneath my calm exterior, a storm of defiance brewed. I was a weaver still, stitching hope into the fabric of oppression. On the rare occasions when Madame Hoa managed to slip past the guards and visit me in the shadowed corridors, her presence was a balm to my spirit. Her silver hair gleamed faintly in the dim light, braided intricately with threads of silk, a living testament to our heritage and our cause. Whispering urgently, she taught me new symbols and refined my techniques, ensuring the messages I sent would be clear to those who needed them most, yet utterly opaque to our captors. "Remember, Mai Ling," she urged softly one evening, "the silk speaks in silence. Let it be our voice when words are chains." The guards, led by Captain Huang, prowled the halls like wolves scenting prey. His cold, calculating eyes missed nothing, yet the subtlety of silk was beyond his grasp. When he searched my sparse belongings, his fingers brushed the embroidered clothes, but he saw only the delicate artistry of a captive's craft, not the coded lifelines woven into each thread. His suspicion never quite crossed into certainty. In the quiet moments, I imagined the rebels receiving my messages, the intricate patterns guiding their movements, warning of danger, or simply reminding them that I was still with them in spirit. The knowledge that my silent resistance could pierce even these prison walls steeled my resolve. Night after night, I wove fragments of hope and defiance, each stitch a rebellion against the darkness that sought to consume us. The silk became my weapon, my shield, my whispered promise that the fight was far from over. One evening, as the moon cast a pale glow over the damp stone, Madame Hoa pressed a small bundle into my hands, more silk threads and a new code book, painstakingly written in invisible ink on silk squares. "Use them wisely," she said, her gaze steady and fierce. "The rebellion depends on your courage now more than ever." The following days tested my patience and ingenuity. Guards tightened their watch, suspicion thickened the air, and the cold seeped into my bones. Yet with every woven message, I felt a spark ignite within me, a fierce flame of hope that no prison could extinguish. The rebellion outside responded. Messages arrived in turn, concealed in the folds of silk delivered by trusted hands. Through this secret exchange, we maintained a fragile but vital lifeline, weaving our fates together beyond the reach of Governor Zhao's cruel grasp. But even as I sustained this silent war, doubts crept in of betrayal, of discovery, of the cost that might come if my ruse were uncovered. Yet with every breath, I reminded myself of the stakes. The silk threads I spun were more than fabric. They were the very fibers of freedom, fragile yet unbreakable. As the days stretched on, the rhythm of weaving became my meditation, my rebellion, and my prayer. Each coded pattern was a step closer to dawn, a promise that even in the darkest shadows, the light of resistance gleamed bright. And so, behind these cold walls, I wove on a silent voice in the night, a spark kindling the fires of hope that no chains could bind. The struggle was far from over. But as long as silk could carry our secrets, and as long as hearts beat with courage, the rebellion would endure. The dawn was coming, threaded through every stitch I made. "Mei Ling," Madame Hoa whispered during one secret visit, "the silk you weave now carries the weight of many lives. Do not falter." I nodded, feeling the heavy truth in her words. "I will not." Outside, faint footsteps echoed the watchful patrols of Captain Huang. But inside, my hands moved with unwavering purpose, spinning a tapestry of defiance that no prison wall could contain. The silence of my weaving was louder than any shout. It was a rebellion in itself, and I was its weaver.